Now let's look at how to use the left-right feature for interesting patterning.
We have some exciting stuff to show you. We have figured out how to make diamonds, how to make the pattern alternate, how to make diagonal lines or little arrows with your slip stitch and with your tuck stitch. And it all has to do with the feature we haven't really shown you in the other videos, which is this left to right button. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and back. And Jack, explain to them what that's really doing.
Okay, it's actually walking the whole mechanism, but what it's telling, the buttons that you've pushed, normally they're numbered 1 through 8, and we're saying 1 and 5 are our selected needles. However, when you start in a different position with that number bar, that tells us what needle we're going to start the count on.
What do we call number 1? We get to define it.
That's right. So instead of starting with number 1, we're starting with number 2 as our first needle, and then we're going to go 1 from there and 5 from there.
So this needle could be either needle 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8, depending on the setting here, which is done from the button on the far right there.
And it's got a little symbol next to it that shows you to rotate from left to right. And what we've pointed out before is watch the edge of this, and it actually moves the whole assembly. So you can tell that you're moving by just looking at that edge.
And there's the little arrow. It's pointing to the 8 now. So it's telling me we're in the 8 position.
And you can start all the way to the left or all the way to the right.
Or in the middle.
Is what we're working with. So we're on the right
side.
Now
I'm on the right. I'm going to set it for tuck using these 2 tuck buttons. Tuck is the most dramatic effect, more so than slip. Also, it will make the fabric a little wider rather than a little narrower, which, working with a fine yarn, for most of us, we're going to need the width for our sweater.
Now, you haven't selected, so...
I haven't, but I want to point something else out. We're in B position out of A and B, because in B position, the needles that are going to knit will come forward, and the ones that are going to tuck will be left back, and that's what works for tuck.
Okay.
Because you can't have 3 needles tucking together. It has to be 1 needle tucking. So we're going to ratchet and knit a tuck row. Do the same thing again. And then I'm going to rotate to the left and repeat. Don't have to change the buttons, do I?
No. It works just fine. And that's what our experimentation has been. The infinite number of possibilities you have just by selecting a set of buttons and seeing what pattern it makes when you walk back and forth.
It's working. I thought I had something hung up, but I think it's just how my weights were.
Oh, yeah, I see.
All right. I haven't gone to the left again yet. So left, ratchet, knit, ratchet, knit. I'll tell you what, I had an old 800, which also works with a ratchet system, though it has punch cards. And it was so stiff, it would make me exhausted. But you know what I am now suspecting?
Crud!
We never took it apart. It was one of my very first knitting machines. I knew much less about it. And I put it down to the design, but I think that it just needed some maintenance probably.
And that's what we've seen is the majority of the circumstances, if nothing's broken and it's not acting like it should, it's just too much accumulation inside the machine.
We've got our diagonal. That is nice.
That is pretty. And like I said, if you were knitting all the way across a 20 needle or a 30 needle pattern, that would be very pretty.
Okay, I did a few plain rows. Let's show them how we did the diamond, assuming we can remember.
Okay. I'm old, you know I can't remember.
That's your excuse. Okay, I moved over a couple places so that I could move either left or right.
Yeah.
I'm going to ratchet and knit, ratchet and knit, and...
You did one plain row.
That's what I was trying to remember, and do a plain row. And now I'm going to move over 2 places, right?
Yes.
1, 2.
And you will push the tuck buttons again.
I will. I kept forgetting that. Tuck buttons are in.
Right.
Ratchet, knit, ratchet, knit, and a plain row.
Right.
And now move to, again.
Mm-hmm.
This, I went back to the first position for
Right.
this pattern. Hit the tuck buttons, ratchet, knit, ratchet, knit, and a plain row. Move over, ratchet, tuck buttons,
Yep.
knit, quick save, ratchet, knit, and a plain row. And there we are, getting our diamonds.
Yes.
Easy peasy, really.
I know. It's a rhythm that you get into with the machine, and I say it's just like driving a 13-speed transmission. You learn to do it, and you don't even think about it anymore.
Yeah, I think it is. I actually can drive the 13-speed too, you know.
Uh-huh. All right, this is what we accomplished, and that is really pretty stuff. And no punch cards were harmed in the making of this splotch.
That's right.
Something I wanted to say about this machine. Now, here she is having to use a ratchet lever on the right. However, that's a singular movement, and pulling the timing belt, exerting enough pressure on the carriage to pull the timing belt back and forth, adds a lot of work to the actual art of knitting. So if you have any impediment to your ability to push that carriage back and forth, this is something you might want to think about. This little carriage really does float beautifully across the bed. And
It's definitely a lighter movement.
do the knitting, and you're not pulling anything but the weight of the carriage, which is smaller, and the yarn.
So maybe you could hire a kid to do the ratcheting for you if you have shoulder problems, because that gets to be a little bit of work.
Well, and
I was
here's
just doing some slip stitch for fun there.
Here's something I want to point out. That little ratchet handle right there, if you put a long extension on it, would make the mechanical advantage even more. But look at what you're doing. You could just take the palm of your hand, push it over. You see, that's not requiring curling or pulling,
No, you're right.
or wrist action.
It can be open-handed. Now, there's some forearm and some shoulder involved.
Yeah, but like I said, put a longer handle on it. Call me, I'll make you a custom bamboo handle. But
I have thought about that.
yeah, the point being, this is a lot easier to operate because the only thing you're doing is pulling the yarn back and forth, not a timing belt.
Where my hand is now, this amount of pressure is definitely smaller than the the punch card or the electronics, because both of them are moving a belt.
Yeah, and I make them run smooth, but this one has the ability to run smoother than the other styles. Something to think about.